Somewhere along the way, being mentally ill stopped being something people tried to hide and started being something people learned how to present. There is a strange contradiction at the center of the internet. We are talking about mental health more than ever before, yet somehow understanding it less. Scroll through any social media platform and you will find sadness that looks beautiful, anxiety that feels cinematic, and depression wrapped in pastel colors, soft lighting, and poetic captions. Pain has become aesthetic. We have learned how to present, not heal. Suffering has become content, and somewhere along the way, mental health stopped being something we tried to heal and started becoming something we learned to curate. This is the aesthetification of mental health. Not the act of opening up, not the fight to destigmatize suffering, but the transformation of inner struggle into a visual identity, a brand, a vibe. To understand how we got here, you have to understand how the internet sees emotion. Feelings online are not just experienced, they are simply performed. A panic attack becomes a TikTok with dramatic music. Burnout becomes a minimalist desk setup and a caption about being tired of everything. Depression becomes grainy photos, oversized hoodies, and playlists titled things like Songs for When You're Feeling Empty. None of this is inherently bad. In many ways, it is proof that people are finally finding language for experiences that were once buried in silence. But the problem begins when expression slowly turns into stylization. When pain becomes something that must look a certain way to be recognized. Real mental health is messy, repetitive, and often boring. It does not always look poetic. It does not fit into 15-second clips. It does not come with perfect lighting or relatable quotes. It looks like canceled plans, unanswered messages, long periods of nothing, and emotions that are too complicated to summarize. But you see, the internet does not reward complexity, it rewards clarity, consistency, and aesthetic coherence. So people unconsciously learn to translate their suffering into something visually legible, something that fits the language of the platform, something that can be liked, shared, and understood at a glance. Over time, this changes not only how mental health is presented, but how it is felt. When your sadness starts to resemble the sadness you have seen online, it becomes difficult to tell where your emotions end and aesthetic begins. You start to view your own suffering from the outside, as if you are both the person in pain and the audience watching it. There is something deeply unsettling about that. The internet has always turned identity into performance, but mental health feels like the final frontier. When even your most vulnerable moments are shaped by algorithms, it raises an uncomfortable question. Are we expressing our feelings, or merely rehearsing them? Part of the reason this happens is that aestheticized sadness is easier to consume than real suffering. A beautifully edited video about feeling lost is digestible. A friend who is genuinely spiraling is not. One fits neatly into a feed, the other demands time, patience, and emotional labor. So platforms end up promoting the version of mental health that feels artistic rather than urgent. The danger is subtle. When mental health becomes an aesthetic, it risks becoming something people want to embody rather than overcome. Sadness becomes a personality trait, and anxiety becomes a trauma. Trauma becomes a narrative. And once suffering becomes an identity, healing can feel like an absolute betrayal. And if you recover, who are you without your pain? If your online presence is built around being broken, what happens when you are no longer broken in the same way? This is why some people feel strangely attached to their struggles. Not because they enjoy suffering, but because suffering has become the most coherent story they have about themselves. The aesthetification of mental health also distorts how we perceive other people's pain. When every expression of sadness looks curated, it becomes harder to take any of it seriously. Vulnerability starts to feel performative even when it is not. People begin to question whether someone is truly struggling or simply playing a role. This creates a cruel feedback loop. Those who are genuinely suffering feel pressured to make their pain more visible, more dramatic, more aesthetic, just to be believed. At the same time, those who are only partially struggling may exaggerate their emotions to match the intensity of what they see online. The result is a culture where extremes are normalized and nuances disappear. But perhaps the most troubling part is that aestheticized mental health can make recovery feel invisible. Healing is rarely cinematic. It looks like small, unglamorous changes. Drinking water more than once a day, going to therapy, setting boundaries, failing, trying again and failing differently. None of this fits into a neat TikTok aesthetic. There's no viral sound for gradual improvement. So while suffering becomes beautiful online, recovery remains quiet. This does not mean we should stop talking about mental health. Silence was never the solution. But it does mean we should be suspicious of how easily pain can be turned into a visual language. Because once suffering becomes an aesthetic, it stops being something that demands change and starts being something that demands engagement. And engagement is not the same as care. The internet taught us how to look at sadness, but it did not teach us how to sit with it. Maybe the real challenge, however, is not to make mental health more visible, but to make it less performative. To allow pain to be ugly, confusing, and unshareable. To let healing be as boring as it's always meant to be. And to remember that your feelings do not need to look like a Twitter post to be real. And sometimes the most authentic form of mental health is the only kind we never get to see.